We'll start in around 2 minutes, all right? Just give me a thumbs up if you can see the slides here. All right, let's start. Good evening, everyone. And this is our last session in the series for Introduction to Machine Learning. So hopefully, maybe sometime later we can restart and maybe we can have exposure to more advanced concepts. So this was an introductory series. Let's see if we can in the future cover a few more topics ranging from intermediate to advanced. All right. So in the last session in part 3, I was requested by some people to take up language modeling. Okay, so specifically with respect to BERT and GPT-2. And when I was learning using about that, so all these GPT-2 BERT, these are pretty new models. So they are not very much in vogue, unlike what we see with the text generation using LSTM or using word to vec or context to vec or doc to vec. All these contextless or context based modeling techniques are something which we regularly use for our mundane tasks. But when it comes to BERT or GPT-2 kind of models, they are very elaborate, pretty complex, trained on a huge data set spanning millions of documents, and even in case of GPT-2, billions of parameters. Okay, so fine tuning for that matter. So we will deep dive into few of those. But rather than directly jumping into BERT or GPT-2, we will take a step back and we will take a look at why it was necessary for us to introduce BERT or to introduce GPT-2. So what was wrong with the earlier language modeling techniques we were using, and where they fell short, and why was the need for BERT arose, and we'll take it from there. So yeah, so this is the final part I was telling. And since in the last part we covered LSTM and word to vec, it makes a lot of continuation sense to cover the language modeling. So it's like the same flow. I hope people who attended session 3, they remember LSTM, because most of the language modeling tools and algorithms we are going to see, they are going to use LSTMs here. So just for brevity's sake. Okay, so you can always connect with me on my Twitter handle, and also let me know that if you would be interested in continuing the machine learning series. Okay, so the agenda today would be, we'll see the language models briefly. We will see the ancestors of BERT and GPT-2, which are the language modeling techniques we are using currently. So BERT and GPT-2 were discovered somewhere, given to us. The white paper was published somewhere in 2018, if I'm not wrong. So that's why they are pretty new. And if for GPT-2, they have not even released the entire model as such for fear of malicious use. So they have released a scaled down version with around 117 parameters. Okay, but still it is pretty powerful. And then we will see some demos. So today's session will be interspersed with demos, right? We'll start right away after the first 1 or 2 couple of slides, we'll right away see one very interesting demo. And yeah, so today's session is more of language and sentences and text completion demos and videos and all those things. So before we even go to the language modeling techniques, let us ask ourselves, why do we need auto text generation? Why do we even need that? So I'm pretty, sure that whenever we are replying in Gmail nowadays, all of us must be aware that as soon as we start writing a reply to some of the emails, the text is auto-generated. Like suppose if we have had an attachment from someone, then most probably the reply will be hi so and so, or hi, the subject would be the sender of the mail, and then would be thanks for, automatically it will complete the word attachment. Or if it's an invitation, then yes, I would surely attend, something of those things, right? So that is, imagine, like, especially in COVID scenario. So this is a real life use case. So in COVID scenario, most of our the portfolio managers, research analysts, now they used to go to actually uh, company visits, so actually pay company visits and do groundwork. So a lot of client face-to-face interaction. Now in the absence of that, and with virtual meetings and everywhere, Zoom meetings and team meetings going on, most of their inboxes are flooded with routine mails like meeting cancelled, meeting scheduled. And especially, think about a scenario for a CIO or a director, and he has 400 odd mails, just invitations for Zoom meetings or client calls, and then he has to reply to all of them. So instead of that, why not build a bot that can understand the context of the mail and then reply automatically saying thanks received or whatever? I mean, those sort of things, right? So that is one of the heavily researched field right now in text generation. Image caption generator. So we actually see, ad campaigns. So Toyota partnered with IBM Watson to create ad campaigns, to create billboards. So we have to caption billboards, right? So all those things where you have to go one step beyond just being creative, and have to infuse a sense of novelty, innovation inside your branding or ad campaigns. So in those sort of things, again, this jumps in, auto text generation jumps in. Automate responses, as we already saw that. And then even in the publishing industry, where publishers have to write epilogue, prologue, or preface to novels or books, or introduction, appendix. So those kind of things which do not involve a lot of originality, creativity, and can be run of the mill tasks. So even for those things, we can save a lot of time having BERT or GPT to step in and do this kind of summarization, or easy to do tasks. So even in the publication industry, this is heavily used. Creating brand slogans and training bots. Okay, so just one example of creating a total ad campaigns with the use of AI. So Toyota, for their new range of cars, they partnered with IBM Watson, and they created some very novel ad campaigns. So what essentially was done, that IBM's Watson was fed over thousands of different activities such as biking, dancing, kayaking, and so on and so forth. And actually, they paired activities which are unsimilar. In like for example, reading and writing might go together, or singing and dancing might go together. But what about reading and directly kayaking, or writing and maybe barbecue? So those sort of things, so activities which do not generally go hand in hand. So the program was asked to pair such unlikely activities and come out with a total new activity. And the result was, as we will see, it was pretty interesting. So let us quickly look at what the result was. The result was ad campaigns like these. Okay, so we will quickly see two of such ad campaigns. So if you see the first ad campaign, it talks of the Toyota. It is built to take your activities further, blah blah blah. So the all those things. Now it is loading your activity. So identified marathon. Okay, so it is identified marathon. It is pairing it with what? Let us see. Let us see what it pairs marathon with. So it will pick up it will pick up something called say luge, marathon and luge. Okay, and then win, luge, or draw. It gave us a slogan. It also gave a description of that activity. Like, draw pictures of movie scenes for team members to guess before the other team completes a 26.2-mile icy luge course. Okay, so syntactically, grammatically, this sentence makes sense, total complete sense. And just look at that. It generated the activity, generated the caption for that activity, and it gave us a complete new activity that we cannot even ever think of. Let us look at one another ad, and this is very I personally enjoyed this a lot compared to the other ads. Which I think it will take activity, it will again partial, right? But it has added to it Barbie. It should look at the name. You should try Taekwon tenderizer. So it is also taking in the terms, right? So when you look at words like tenderizer, and Taekwon is something related to martial arts, tenderizer is something related to barbecue. Maybe I don't even know that that's a word called as tenderizer, but nevertheless it makes sense, right? That it has to do something with barbecuing, frying something on the fire. Okay, right? Sorry. And description, tenderize pieces of meats for your backyard, blah blah blah. Okay, so with a steady diet of karate chops. So again, the AI in itself, it doesn't know that what is karate, or what is the barbecue, or what is martial arts. But nevertheless, it has combined two activities and given us a very coherent, comprehensive, syntactically, semantically correct sentence. And just imagine the potential of right? So these are a few of the most notable ways in which AI is being used. I mean, NLP is being used in different scenarios. All right. Okay. So that brings us to how all these auto text generation works. So for that, we need to, of course, prepare data, which means you have to have loads of data. The data has to be rich, diverse. It has to represent all of facets equivalently. So if one particular class cannot be underrepresented or overrepresented. So we saw the issues last time with the what happens when one class takes predominance over the others, right? So we saw, lot of metrics like accuracy, precision, recall, and stuff, and how many problems and how it creates havoc. We have to clean and label the data. We have to feed the data to our machine learning algorithm. Then we have to train, test, evaluate, of course, and then conclude. So for all these things, our conclusion is it has to have, it has to be fed into a machine learning algorithm, which is either supervised or unsupervised learning. And since we are talking of something related to natural language processing, either voice or language, that comes when these two terms come, it automatically implies that we will be dealing with neural networks. Just another, as an aside, even for these slide deck, if you see, you have something called as design ideas. These design ideas, depending on the context of your text, it is going to give you some design highlights or hints for your matter, for your data. For example, I did not have these diagrams here or these steps labeled like prepare, clean, label, and blah, blah, blah. I only had, for example, these bullet points like take loads of data or make sure the data is rich and diverse. It is representing all faculties equivalently and those sort of things. So seeing my steps, it in the design ideas, it gave me a pretty nice slide, very concise and very meaningful slide. Some icons, for example, the feed icon where you can see a cow there may not make much sense, but then going by just the word feed, right, the context of the word feed, it has done a pretty decent job. This is where the BERT and GPT-2 and all these models, they step in, like understanding the context. Now here feed doesn't relate to the feed or food. It is nothing related to something which is edible or portable, it refers to the data feed, the data load which we are talking of. So this is where our ancestral models, they kind of fail a bit, and then that's why there was a need for BERT and GPT-2. Nevertheless, let us still look at some of the interesting models which are which form the fundamental building blocks for the advanced algorithms. So when you talk of COVE, which is contextual word vectors, again, just sorry for the flow interruption. Again, I did not want to directly talk of BERT because there are a lot of things which we will, while learning BERT, we will come across like bidirectional, like softmax activation functions, like feed forward or correction techniques or attention models. So all these things, instead of explaining right when we are dealing with BERT, it is better to look at the building blocks of BERT. So it is better to look at the ancestors of BERT, how they implied these models, how they built up over the uh, uh, shortcomings of previous models, earlier models, and how one by one, the correct day to corrective measures, and how BERT and GPT-2 finally kind of rounded off all their weaknesses and came up with something much more robust. So when you're talking of COVE, which is contextual word vectors, now which are word embeddings which are learned by an encoder in an attention sequence model. We'll come to the attention sequence to sequence model shortly. So actually what does COVE do? It's nothing but the entire input sentence is represented in form of a vector. Okay, but it is different from our traditional word embeddings like word to vec or doc to vec. Word to vec and doc to vec, these are contextless. When you look at a word river bank, for example, or bank of a our normal bank, for example. So when you say river bank or our normal financial institution bank, so the word bank in both cases is going to have the same encoding. It doesn't depend on the context. So when I'm talking of river bank, it is completely different. When I'm talking of our normal financial institution bank, it is completely different. So in case of contextless embeddings like word to vec, they don't take into account the context of the word, but COVE does. So the entire input sentence, it is represented as a few vectors. Okay. Now remember, here we talked of attention sequence to sequence machine learning model. So when we talk of attention sequence to sequence, what does it mean? Compare it with our human analogy or human vision. So when I'm seeing a picture of a dog, for example, and let's assume that few of the features maybe are obfuscated or hidden or not available, but still, let's say, maybe this ear is not shown to me, and maybe only this part is the red highlighted part is shown to me. Still, depending on my past knowledge of having seen dogs, all right, I can still make a guess that okay, this has to be an ear, it has to be pointed because the right hand side ear is pointed, and I know how a dog looks like. So to complete the anatomy of the dog, the missing part, the missing ear part of the image should be an ear. But just imagine that, if I was given only this part with the coat and the collar, so that are not very dog related features. And even as a human being, it is very difficult for me to try and fill in the blank with something meaningful. Okay. I mean, I could put in anything, but that would not be an accurate prediction. So just extrapolate it to our language modeling. Okay. So when we are trying to fill in the blanks, like in this case, so we are concentrating on our attention on some few features. So when I was trying to fill in the blank for the missing ear, I was paying attention to these features and not to the features of, the bow tie or the sweater or the shawl. So these features I was not paying attention. My attention was on very few features which are meaningful and which help me fill out the missing piece, figure out the missing piece. Exactly same way, when you look at language modeling, okay, so when language models, they have to complete a sentence, they will examine the relationship between the words, and then they will try to give attention to few words. So for example, when I say she is eating a green apple, right, so when I say she is eating, automatically it infers that the next word or the predicate has to be something related to food. So eating apple is somewhere it will pay attention, and then again eating a green apple is somewhere it will pay attention. Low attention would be eating and green, or forget the stop words, anyways they'll be eliminated. Okay, so the color term describes the food, but probably not so much with eating directly. So eating and apple are paid high attention. Green and apple are paid high attention. Okay. So what happens basically is when you say attention, you are basically giving it more importance, more weight. Okay. So when you talk in terms of language modeling, we call it as giving those inputs more weight. So when we talk of COVE, that is contextual vectors, she is eating a green apple will be converted to a context vector. The A is a word filler, so it is ignored. All right. So it will be converted to a context word vector. Okay. And then maybe the decoder is a language translation task, for example, where it has to decode it into its Chinese equivalent. All right. And a decoder is initialized to emit the transformed output. Okay. Now the early work only used the last state of the encoder as the decoder initial state. So whatever the last state of the encoder was there, that was the starting state of the decoder. That also is one of the shortcomings of the early models. Okay. So when we talk of COVE now, okay, where COVE is used, so one thing for sure is giving attention to inputs, but again how attention to inputs will help us use COVE in our language generation scenarios, language completion or filling scenarios. All right. So from COVE, because of the attention sequence to sequence model, we come to something called as neural machine translation, NMT. So NMT forms the basis of COVE. That's why it is, imminent that we study about NMT. Okay. Now, when you look at this example here, where it was an encoder-decoder scenario, where the encoder was encoded. I mean, the input was encoded into a fixed length and outputted also. The problem is the fixed length. Okay, the fixed length. So in case of longer sentences, it will not remember the context. Exactly the same problem which we had with recurrent neural networks, and that's why LSTMs had to step in. So with longer sentences, they will forget the context, and they will forget the state, and that's why we need something which should persist for the entire context of the sentence. So it doesn't matter that it has reached half of the sentence and then forgotten the first half, or it has forgotten the context of the first half. So that is where neural NMT comes in. So disadvantage of fixed length was remembering long sentences, and then the attention mechanism was born to help memorize long source sentences. So instead of remembering each and every word in the sentence, so she is eating a green apple. So instead of remembering and encoding each and every sentences, if we could very cleverly assign more importance to words like eating apple or green apple, then it becomes easier for the neural network to persist information about important things and to help memorize long sentences. So context vector consumes three pieces of information. It has the input here, which is denoted by x1, x2. So this is the source. These are, if you attended the last session, these are the hidden layers. Okay, when we are talking of LSTM, when you talk of persisting the context, when you talk of back propagation in time, automatically it is nothing but LSTMs. Okay, so these are hidden layers in between, and they are bidirectional. So they go forward, from the left to right and also from right to left. So the sentence, it will go through in both directions. And after doing that, so this is the source, which is our sentence, she is eating a green apple. These are the hidden neural network layers, which are bidirectional. On top of that, because we saw that we want to remember longer sentences, which is why we need to put attention on certain words. So these are the global alignment weights. This is the attention. So these weights are nothing but the attention which is given to important words, and this is the output, the target. Okay. So this is essentially what it speaks of, the diagram it speaks of. Moving on, now NMT forms the basis of COVE, contextual vectors. In contextual vectors, the only other difference which we see apart from the previous diagram is that in the source, we are embedding it using some techniques. Okay, so this is global vectorization, could be word to vec or something like that, where each word is transformed into its vector format. And then again, this is the bidirectional LSTM, the hidden layers here, the attention layer, which highlights the few of the words which are of importance, and then this is the output layer. Okay, so neural machine translation is composed of, this is the two layer LSTM, the attention layer and the output layer. It is pre-trained on English to German translation task. So it is part of supervised learning. It is pre-trained. Now when it is pre-trained on English and German translation, it automatically, has higher understanding of semantics and syntax. Okay, so encoder, it captures semantic and syntactic meanings before even transforming it to into another language. So the encoder output, finally the output of this pre-trained model, so now it is already pre-trained on English to German translation, right? So this output, so the output could be used further for various downstream tasks. So this is a pre-trained model. It has high understanding of semantics and syntax because of English to German translation it is being trained on, and then the output could be directly used for certain language tasks. But the language tasks which can be used are again task specific. For example, what kind of task I'm using it for? Is it being used for question and answer kind of tasks, or hypothesis related tasks, or named entity recognition related tasks? So name entity recognition is something, where I recognize proper nouns or some entities within a sentence or within a paragraph, which are like, for example, the United States of America, the president of United States of America, or when I have names Donald Trump, Barack Obama, those sort of things. So those are named entities. So again, the downstream tasks which the languages, which the model is used for, it depends on the purpose of what we want to achieve. And unfortunately, contextual vectors, as we will see, will not be able to fulfill a lot of downstream tasks. So the problem there is, so because it is pre-trained only for a translation kind of scenario, English to German translation, and the final the pre-trained model for this translation tasks, it can be used only in very limited scenarios, like a question and answer type of scenario, obviously language translation, and maybe some SNAIL, which is Stanford National Language Inference. Okay, those very few scenarios it can be used for. Okay. Moving on from COVE, so what are the limitations of COVE? Which means, pre-training is limited, and then the output of the pre-training could be again used in very few downstream applications. Okay, so we then, after that, we move on to ELMO. Now, since COVE was bounded, limited by supervised pre-training, why not move on to something which is pre-training in an unsupervised way? Okay, so a bidirectional language model is the foundation for ELMO. ELMO is embeddings from language model. Okay, and, what does it do is learns the contextualized word representation. ELMO also, by the way, forms the basis for GPT-2, not GPT-2, it forms the basis for GPT. Okay, so ELMO, which is language embeddings from language model, it learns the contextualized word representation of the entire sentence. Okay, by pre-training a language model in unsupervised way. COVE was supervised, ELMO is unsupervised. So, which means what happens is, given a sequence of tokens, because obviously when you give words, it will be tokenized using some language embeddings, word embeddings. The model predicts the probability of the next, given some historic knowledge. For example, the color of the sky is. Now it has to predict blue or reddish, pinkish, whatever, depending on the history, also knowledge which it already has. Okay. So Elmo is bidirectional, which means it will parse the sentences both ways. So it will parse it from left to right also, which is how we read it. So the color of the sky is something like that. That also it will parse, and it will also parse it backwards. So from the backwards. So forward pass means the history contains the words before the target token. So if I have to predict the color of the sky is right blue or whatever, so my forward pass would be all the words before my target blue, and backward pass would be the all the words after the target token. Okay, so I mean in the example which I gave, there's nothing after this blue, but let's say if we had a paragraph, the color of the sky today is blue, but tomorrow because of the weather forecast being blah blah blah, the color of the sky is expected to be gray, something of that sort, right? So a forward pass and backward pass, it will parse the sentences both ways. And the predictions in both directions are modeled by multi-layer LSTMs with hidden states. If you look at this, so this is your input sentence. These are your embeddings. Okay. When you talk of embeddings, okay, so this is nothing but, and you talk of, so embeddings are the word embeddings, which is like embedding the your input sentence into some using word to wake or those kind of word embeddings. This is the hidden layer, which is a bidirectional LSTM. So you have a forward pass, you have a backward pass. And this is, if Softmax, if we remember in our very first introduction session, we had seen some kind of optimization function, right? Activation, not optimization, activation function, which kind of, normalizes and bounds your input into a nice, limited data values, data points, rather than having unbounded and a wavered data values. That is activation function is something which gives a nice shape to our data points. So you have a activation function, and finally you have your output here. Now the hidden layers here in Elmo, they capture both the syntactic and semantic information. Semantic is word sense disambiguation. Word sense disambiguation is exactly what, for example, when you talk of when you see our earlier example where we talked of river bank and our financial institution bank, the word bank had the exactly same vector representation irrespective of the context. Now, word sense disambiguation will remove that limitation. So it will parse the word depending on the context. So when I say the boat's motor ran, or the dog ran off from the boat, or the motor of the boat ran smoothly, then ran meaning here is different. Okay, so it will parse the word ran differently. Or even in our case where where I'm saying the river bank and financial institution bank, depending on the context of the word, it will parse the word accordingly. So that is something which is word sense disambiguation. It will also be syntactic, which is POS tagging is part of the speech tagging. Part of the speech is subject, object. So when I'm talking of, Roger is the, Rafael Nadal is the best ever to so Rafael Nadal is a legend, but Roger Federer is the best ever to play the game. So now part of speech tagging, my subject has moved from Rafa to Roger. So that kind of syntactic thing also, subject, object, predicate, the tense which we are using, and all those things also this hidden layers will do. Okay, and when finally when the output is available, okay, it could be used for a task such as quad, which is question and answer. SNLI is Stanford Natural Language Inferencing, and then it is also, could be used in some, for other language modeling sentence completion tasks too. Not too very effective ways. For example, when you look at a few examples out there, say story completion or paragraph summarization using Elmo, then the performance or the output is not as coherent as what you would expect with a proper human operator or a human writer. All right, but for tasks like question and answer or NLI or entailment, these kind of things, it is a good fit. Instead of going into complex things and CPU heavy things like BERT or GPT-2, Elmo could be ideal fit for those scenarios. Okay. But again, so the in Elmo, the shortcoming was unsupervised pre-training, and again it was task specific, right? So I cannot use it for universally for all language modeling tasks. Again, it is falling in one particular scenario where either I can use it for like Cove contextual vectors I could use only for language translation. Uh, the Elmo I was able to use, I'm able to use for question answer and language inference kind of scenarios. So what if, I had to use it universally in all, language modeling tasks. So not only task specific. That happens when we have CVT, cross view training. Okay, so CVT combines Elmo's task-specific and unsupervised pre-training into one unified learning procedure. Okay, so here it will have the training on labeled and unlabeled examples. In labeled examples, so she lives in Washington. So this is a labeled example, and this is something which it is pre-training on labeled, and then there will be unsupervised learning on unlabeled data. Why unsupervised learning? So even in the unlabeled data, just let me pull it up a bit so that we are clear. Okay. And also let me see if there are any questions right now. Okay. Okay. And just let me also maximize. Yeah. So when you look at cross view training, okay, and then you look at cross view training, it is based on unsupervised pre training and also a task specific learning. Okay. So when you look at label data, she lives in Washington, then it will be a BILSTM encoder, and this will be the primary prediction. Okay. For example, when I have to say that my this is my input and my output, I have to predict she lives in dash, right? Then it has to predict. So this is the label data, and it will accordingly label it properly. PO is the loss function. Loss function is the loss of accuracy. Okay, so how much far away from the accuracy? Accurate prediction. How much far away are we from the accurate prediction? This is unlabeled example. In unlabeled example, they traveled to Washington by plane. Okay. Again, it has an LSTM encoder and it has something called as primary and auxiliary prediction modules. The primary prediction module is only unidirectional. The auxiliary prediction module, they work on different parts of the sentences, not the sentence as a whole. So, for example, auxiliary 1 would work on they travel to Washington. Then auxiliary 2 would be they travel to Washington by something. Auxiliary 3 and 4. So primary is unidirectional. Auxiliary could be bidirectionals. So auxiliary 3 and 4, they work on the reverse sentence. Basically, how it helps is, this kind of distills the sentence into smaller parts, and then it is also easier for it to work on the context. So I don't have to remember a very long context and pay attention, give attention weights to words. Due to the auxiliaries working on parts of the sentences, it will automatically kind of help to remember the context and work on the forward and backward passes. All right. Okay. And again, the interesting aspect here is, what happens is, our final aim here would be that the primary and the auxiliary prediction. So this is the labeled data prediction and this is the unlabeled data prediction. So this primary prediction and the auxiliary prediction should be as close as possible. So our goal is to minimize the distance. You remember distance, when we talk of the distance between words in word to vec, we always talk of the cosine distance. How far, how near they are, the angle between the words. Okay. So the cosine distance between the auxiliary and the primary prediction should be as near as possible. That would be our final goal for the cross view training. So this is, about the CVT. So when training for multiple tasks simultaneously, CVT adds extra primary prediction module for additional tasks. And the multitask learning encourages better generality of representation. Okay, so when you are the auxiliary tasks which are going on, they kind of, generate a labeled subset, right? So when with auxiliary tasks are working on different parts of the sentences, the unlabeled data, they are also going to produce some output that forms our subset of data. Okay, and these mini versions, these mini data sets, these mini subsets could also be used further for language modeling tasks, but it's a very rare scenario that we have not come close to exploiting the mini subsets which are given to us by the auxiliary data sets. So it's not a very common scenario. Now, when you talk of ULM fit, but again, just going back, taking a step back to CVT. So CVT, although it kind of combines the, pre-training and unsupervised learning into one unified task, again, it is still not in a position that it can take on universal scenarios, like give it to any language modeling task and it will have the same accuracy, same prediction. CVT, it is a good fit for multi-learning, so multi tasks at the same time, but then it is still not a fit for universal language modeling, which brings us to ULM fit, which is universal language modeling fine tuning. Okay, so which is a generative pre-trained language modeling plus task specific fine tuning. Now ULM fit itself says that it is task specific fine tuning. So the question of it being universally used for all kind of scenarios is a bit rare. ULM fit follows three steps, which is it is generating a language model pre-training on Wikipedia text. Okay, so the earlier text, earlier files, if you see, Elmo or COF, they were not, the source for their training was, actually depending on maybe the Stanford database or stuff like that. Here it is clearly trained on the Wikipedia text. Okay, and the ULM fit, it has two training techniques for the fine tuning. One is we saw in Elmo, right, that all the hidden layers, they capture different information like semantic information, syntactic information. So ULM fit, it knows that the hidden layers, they capture different layer of information, and it has two types of fine tuning, which is discriminative fine tuning and slanted triangular fine tuning, which is the learning rate. So the learning rate for different layers is different. Again, when it comes to it takes us back to the concept of attention. Okay, so slanted triangular learning rates refers to a special learning rate that is first linearly increasing and then linearly decays. What happens when the rate first linearly increase is that it will fit the model faster, and the rate learning rate, when it linearly decays, then it gives enough time for the model to fine tune it. So we are training it faster, but again we are fine tuning it for various scenarios. All right, so this is the basis for the fine tuning process. Okay, and then it is again pre-trained with the two feed forward layers, and the normalization layer is a softmax, so that we get a nice bounded input. Okay, so if you look at the ULM fit roughly like this, it will be something like pre-training. So this is pre-training on the Wikipedia text. Then we'll have fine tuning of identifying the different hidden layers, the learning rates of the different layers, and so fine tuning them, and then finally having the classifier fine tuning, like the output. Okay, where you have the softmax normalization and those techniques. So so when you say the gold dollar or gold, the best scene ever, the best scene. Okay, so you look at the sentences. Okay, so when you talk of gold, okay, then when it when you talk of gold reserves, or you talk of gold as a metal, so depending on the text it was trained on, it will try to make a prediction. Okay, but then depending on the fine tuning, it might, the gold, whatever the gold coin, maybe it will adjust its prediction, right? And then finally it is going to bound your, if there are a lot of possible values like gold coin or gold necklace or gold something something, then finally it is going to have a classifier fine tuning and bound your output values, have a normalization of your output values. Okay, So even in case of ULM fit, it is fine tuned to specific scenarios. So like here in our case, we saw that it was fine tuned for the classification scenario. But none of these ELMO or ULM fit or CVT or COVE, none of these are yet there for the taking for universal language modeling techniques, which brings us to OpenAI GPT, which is generative pre-training transformer. Okay. Now it expands the unsupervised learning to a much larger scale. Of course, when you want best results and accurate predictions, your data sources have to vary. And as we keep on saying that the data has to be diverse, the data has to be in tons, okay, and the data has to be clean, labeled, representing all sources equivalently, not under or over representations, not predominance of any particular group of corpus text, okay. So in OpenAI GPT, as I earlier also mentioned that ELMO, so bidirectional LSTMs, okay, that forms the basis of GPT, but the corpus on which it is trained, it is much larger, okay, so it's a giant collection of free text. The model architecture is a bit different from ELMO in the sense that it uses a shallow concatenation of independently trained. So in ELMO, we saw that we had left to right and right to left LSTMs, right? While GPT is a multi-layer transformer decoder. Okay, so ELMO is still the basis, but it differs in the way that the left to right and right to left passes are independent in ELMO, whereas in GPT-2 it is a multi-layer transformer decoder. Now, Elmo feeds embedding into models customized for specific tasks. So in Elmo, we saw that it was used for SNLI or Q&A kind of scenarios, whereas GPT fine-tunes the same base model for all tasks. So the GPT trained model, we can use the pre-trained GPT model, we can use for all of our language tasks. Okay. This is BPE is byte paired encoding. Okay, so OpenAI GPT also uses byte paired encoding, and BPE was initially used to solve open vocabulary issues in machine translation, because when we are translating from one language to another, there could be many unknown scenarios in which we come across words which have same connotation in the, I mean, same meaning in the same context, but maybe different, how should I say, different meaning altogether when it is translated. So you can come across such scenarios, and rare and unknown words could often be decomposed into multiple subwords. So what does BP do is it finds the best word segmentation, okay, by breaking down or merging frequent pairs of characters, okay. And the most substantial upgrade that GPT got was to get rid of this task specific. So all these models which we have seen were all very, very task specific, and the pre-trained language model could either be used for translation or for few other classification tasks or something like that. But now the greatest upgrade which came with GPT was that the pre-trained model could be used universally for all kind of tasks, not only like test classification or something like that. So when you see that classification, yes, it could be used for that. It could be used for entailment. It could be used for similarity. Sorry. Similarity. So when you saw similarity, something like word to vec, right, where I was trying to get words having similar meanings. So like when we saw the hotel reviews example, then the reviews consisting of words like smelly, stinky, right? So these words carry the same meaning. So they are grouped closer together. The distance between them is, the angle between them is lesser. The distance is nearer. Similarly, Open AI GPT can be used for that. It can be used for multiple choice kind of question answer scenarios. Okay. So the pre-trained model could be deployed in a lot of scenarios. Let us see one such scenario. Let us look at. So yep, this is the language modeling. Let us start with a clean slate. All right. So now it will predict as and when I'm typing the sentence. This is what GPT and BERT and all these language modeling things do. They are going to fill in the blanks. So I'm saying I am, look at the predictions, not a very sure undo. and the probabilities which they are undo is like, sorry, undo the text, and the probability which they are outputted. Okay, so maybe I am a very, sorry, a girl who, okay, look at the prediction. Who is, now it is also predicting the verbs which I can use, that who loves, who has, who can, who was. So maybe who is very, okay, good, beautiful, happy, young, strong. Maybe let's say career. And now you look at the words oriented, driven, focused, minded. Not even one prediction that it has made does not make, I mean, has made, does not make any sense. You know, it all the predictions which it has given me make perfect sense. So even when you have an option which is given with the probability of 28.5% confidence, even that word makes perfect sense. So career oriented, career driven, career focused, career minded, whatever it is. So this is what essentially your Open AI GPT is going to do. It is going to kind of, predict or fill in the blanks. It's not predict, it is a fill in the blanks. Okay, going to be a fill in the blanks. And it could be deployed in a lot of scenarios. So the one which we saw here was sentence completion. It could as easily be deployed in the text classification scenarios, where you could want to group text by prose or a novel or fiction or those kind of things. Now finally we will come to BERT. So all this was kind of a history, and OpenAI GPT was the thing till BERT stepped in. Okay, so till BERT stepped in, OpenAI GPT was kind of unchallenged, but then BERT broke down a couple of myths about AI GPT, and it fell short of of couple of scenarios which BERT excelled in. What was the need for BERT? So as we have been keeping on saying that when it comes to NLP, there is never something called as enough data. Okay, so I mean, when we come to tasks, for example, like prediction for diseases, or when it comes to tasks where you have to predict an output like healthy, unhealthy, or tumor, benign and malignant, there is a limit to the amount of data you can feed to the system. But when it comes to natural language kind of task, there is nothing called as enough data, or enough training data. So for good predictions, good accuracy, for comprehensible text, for coherent text, the amount of corpus that has to be fed in has to be humongous. And when we do this, I mean, the when we don't have a lack, I mean, when we don't input enough data, and then we want to create task specific data sets. So for example, maybe I'm not able to generate a universal data set kind of a stuff which can be deployed for all kind of language scenarios. And then as we saw with the Cove and with Elmo and CVT and ULM Fit, then we will kind of bifurcate into specific training data sets. So maybe this will work only in case of language translation, this will work only in case of question and answer scenarios. So then what happens is, when we do this thing, then for each subset, when each class you represent, you have only few thousand training examples, right? And then that is not enough. So if there'll always be outliers, there'll always be exceptional scenarios, there'll always be rare scenarios in which you still cannot figure out the correct word or the correct option. Okay, so in those kind of things, to help bridge this data, researchers they came up with various general purpose language representations. So forget about now task specific. Now this is general purpose language representation. Okay, and they wanted to pre-train this. So we have something called, which is pre-trained on a general purpose, not a task specific language. So general purpose pre-trained data set, and that could be used for any kind of scenarios. BERT is open source, so it can be very easily downloaded, and we can use the pre-trained models and I mean, suit our specific purposes. Or in fact, we can even feed in new data, train it. But trust me on my word for it that BERT training takes a lot of time. Okay, it's not so easy that you just have the libraries, have Google Colabs or Azure notebooks and import the libraries and start. It actually requires TPUs, and the BERT pre-trained data itself, it took them around 4 days on 16 CPUs. okay, to actually pre-train that huge amount of corpus. So what is the core idea behind BERT? Okay, when we say the woman went to a store and bought a dash of shoes, right? So it could be like few times it would be brought a bag full of shoes or brought a pair of shoes, right? Now it would be like in 80% of the time it would output pair of shoes. But in the pre-BERT world, so when BERT was not there and we were having this Elmo and these kind of modeling techniques, okay, so what would the model have done? Okay, then it would have either looked at the left to right scenario. So the woman went to the store and bought something, and they're trying to make sense of the context. So what am I talking about? Bought a bag full of shoes or brought a cart full of shoes, or something like that. Now there are with Open AI GPT and Elmo, we had bidirectional where the sentence was passed even left and right, but they were independent. So one layer was parsing the sentence to from left to right, the other layer independently was parsing the sentence from right to left, so that to make sense of the history before and after the target word. Okay, but what if we could do it at the same time, right? So this at the same time thing was brought in by BERT. Okay, so when it comes to this unidirectional approach, right, we can predict the next word, okay, and then again, as we saw with the example which I just showed you, like I am a very or I am a something. So as you keep on filling the word, it will keep on predicting the next word. So I am, then you fill something, then it will predict something, then it will predict something. So this one directional approach, it works well for generating sentences, okay, but for BERT to deploy it in like loads of scenarios, be it classification, be it Q&A, be it a paragraph completion, okay, in those scenarios, then BERT is a model which is bidirectionally trained and passes happen at the same time. So what was missing with Elmo, even though it was bidirectional, was this at the same time, the simultaneous part, right? So when you have this at the same time parsing, we can have a deeper sense of the language context, okay? And instead of predicting the next word, what BERT does it? It doesn't predict the next word. It makes use of something called as masked language. It is just going to tell me, predict the masked word. It is not going to predict the actual next word in the sentence. It is going to unmask the masked word and going to predict that masked word. We will come to this. We'll come to this shortly. What is language masking and what is next sentence and stuff like that. Okay. So masking means that the model looks in both directions, so left to right and right to left, and it uses the full context of the sentence, okay, in order to predict the masked word. Masking scenario will come to that shortly, like in a couple of slides here, okay, and because these left to right and right to left passes are done simultaneously, sometimes it is also called as non-directional. So, if you look at BERT, it is bidirectional embedded representation for transformers. That is the full form of BERT. But then, because the passes happen at the same time, so that we can have more intrinsic view, more in detail view of the semantics of the sentence. So that's why sometimes it is also called as non-directional. Now, why this directionless is so effective? Okay. As I was earlier also saying that pre-trained language models can be context-free or context-based. Context-free is that the word, irrespective of the context, is going to have the same vector representation. So when I say bank or river bank, the bank word is going to have the same word representation. Context-based representation, and as in the case of Elmo, they are unidirectional or bidirectional, but independent. So bidirectional also left to right at once, right to left at once, not together. Okay. This is what. So bank account and bank of the river. So word to vec would have the same context free. Now context-based model generate a representation of each word that is based on other words in the sentence. So when I say the word I access the bank account, then the unidirectional contextual mode would represent bank based on I accessed the, okay, so when I have to predict, for example, I access the dash account, okay, then it will predict the word bank on based on the precursor. So I access the, but not the word account. Okay. So BERT, what it does is it will represent the word bank in both its formats, from the left to right and right to left. Okay, making it simultaneously and deeply bidirectional. That is one of the parts in where BERT scores. Okay, it is based on the transformer model architecture. So what is a transformer model? Transformer, what it does is, okay, it will pay attention. So we remember we talked about attention sequence to sequence model. So transformer model also does that. It applies attention mechanism to understand the relationship between words. So what am I talking of and which word deserves attention? So let's see at this let's see the sentence. I arrived at the bank after crossing the river, right? So now when I look at the word bank, it will immediately interpret that I'm referring to the shore of the river and not our usual bank where we open our accounts and those sort of things. So if this kind of attention is given to word relationships, the attention sequence to sequence model which we saw, if this kind of attention is given to words to preserve the relationships, the transformer will be trained immediately and it can predict the word faster. So it can pay the attention to word river and make this decision that it has refers to the shore. It doesn't refer to the financial bank. Okay. How does BERT work? So when you give an input sentence, my dog is cute, he likes playing. Okay, so the start of the sentence will have a token. So every sentence, not every sentence, the start of our source text will be delineated by a token, which is a CLS token. Okay, each sentence itself is marked by a separator. So I know that my dog is cute, separator, he likes playing. So these are two different sentences. Okay, and then you are going to embed the each of the word. Okay, so embed using word to vec or those kind of word embeddings. Okay, and then also segment embeddings meaning depending on the separator what kind, which part of the sentence it belongs to. So these, so my dog is cute, it belongs to the first segment. After the separator metadata, then the next part will belong to the next segment. And then also position embedding, at what position of the sentence these embeddings fall at. Okay, so my is the zeroth, CLS is the zeroth position, my is the first, and stuff like that. Okay, so this is nothing but the token embeddings which we are talking of. And since BERT, the goal of BERT, unlike GPT, is not interpreting or predicting the next word in the sentence. No, BERT, what it does is it will just try to unmask a particular token and see whether that token fits properly or not. It does not predict the word, it just predicts the token, the mask. Okay, and when we talk of token embedding, this is what we were talking of. We saw that CLS, segment and positional embeddings, which is the SEP and the other tokens. Okay, now masked LM. Okay, the idea is simple. What BERT does is it randomly masks 15% of the word in the input, replacing them with some token. Okay, so maybe my dog is something like that. So I will replace randomly 15% of my words with some mask. Okay, and then run the entire sequence through my BERT attention encoding. Okay, and then predict only the masked words. So when I was talking of I cross the river bank, okay, so maybe that word bank is masked, and then I will run it through the BERT attention based encoder and predict only the masked words based on the context provided by other non-masked words. So if that word river, I cross the river bank and reach the other side, so the word bank is masked, or maybe I cross the river bank and reach the dash, so maybe the shore, for example, so that is masked. Then it will look at the context of the unmasked words and try to predict the masked word. Okay, the what happens with this masking approach is that the model tries to predict only when the mask token is present in the input. So when the BERT has been pre-trained with the corpus, right? And if the masked word is already there in the corpus, then only it tries to predict that. Okay, but we want to deploy it in a universal scenario, right? So what happens is, to deal with this kind of scenario, what happens is 15% of those tokens which are selected, of them 80% are actually replaced with the token. So the bank word or the shore word is actually replaced with the bank or the shore token only. Okay, 10% are replaced with the random token, so they may or may not be correct, and 10% the tokens are left unchanged. So now when the BERT is training, right? So let's say it predicts a wrong word, or it wrong mask. Okay, then the loss function, it considers prediction of the mask tokens only. Unmasked tokens it does not. It does not pay attention to. And then the result is that whenever it is, when we are running the sentences from left to right or right to left, every time it will predict the mask token. Oh, is it correct? No, it is not correct. Then it will, depending on its context and the history, it will correct its prediction, and then the left to right and right to left will converge. Okay, but the way they converge is in a slow manner, so that it gets lot of time to fine tune its predictions. This is the power of BERT. Then it is also employs next sentence prediction, NSP. So which is done so as to understand the relationship between two sentences. Okay, so when you talk of NSP, right, this kind of training mechanism is used for question answer tasks. How it understands that the sentences are disparate sentences is with the use of that SEP token. And how we are going to let it predict that this are logically two connected sentences, and sentence 2 comes after sentence 1. So that is how we train it. Is 50% of the time when we are training it, the second sentence comes after the first one, and 50% of the time it is some random sentence from the full corpus. And while training BERT, it has to label the sentences as whether is it next, is this the correct next sentence or not. For example, when you look at this input, the man went to, this is the masked word, store, this is separator, he brought a gallon something of milk. Okay, then the label is this sentence the logical next sentence, right? Yes, so the label is next. Yes, it is correct. The input is the man went to the store, penguin are flightless birds. Then it is, these two sentences are not logically or related in the flow, right? So then it will, the label will be not next. So this BERT is taught to produce, this predict, and then while predicting this, it will always take care of, that is how we are training it. So 50% of the time it will be not the logical sentence, logical completed sentence. If 50% of the time it would be a random sentence from the full corpus, and it has to predict whether it's next or not next. Okay, and the BERT model is trained with both. It is trained with the masking also, and it is trained with the NSP also, to have best of both the worlds. So together is better, right? And the model is trained with both the strategies, so that to minimize the loss function. Okay, and the BERT architecture is, there are 4 versions available out there. So even when you are using the BERT model in our own algorithms, there are 2 versions, four versions, which is 12 layered, 268 hidden nodes, 12 attention heads, and 110 million parameters. 24 layer, 1024 hidden nodes, 16 attention heads, 340 million parameters. 340 million is something you can imagine, right? GPT-2 goes a step ahead, and it is trained on 1.5 billion parameters. Okay, now BERT can be used for a wide variety of tasks. And let's say we are creating a QA kind of scenario, question answer scenario. How BERT will how BERT will be expected to behave there. So you just go to the BERT GitHub repository, you take the BERT model, the pre-trained model, you can deploy it in a variety of tasks. So let's say you have to deploy it in a question answer kind of scenario. There what we do is, in that scenario, a question answer is nothing but, given a question, it's a prediction example, right? So what is the best fit, what is the best answer from the text corpus that will fit this kind of a question. So this is a prediction scenario. Okay, now the input question is, where do water droplets collide with ice crystals to form precipitation? but the input paragraph was precipitation comes from something like that. Now the output answer will be within a cloud. So it has to go through the corpus. It has to predict what will be the best fit for this kind of a sentence, and it has to output it accordingly. So like prediction, you can also deploy it in a classification task. So this is a tutorial which you can try it, because as I said, right, training BERT model, deploying BERT model takes a lot of time. So I have embedded links for the BERT GitHub repository, and from there you can download. So these are the BERT models. Remember that if you are not using TPUs, right, or GPUs, then please stick to the uncased versions, the 12-layer versions. Okay. Then in order to use the BERT, the pre-trained models, we have to convert our data into a TSV. Okay. So this is the classification code for, I have shared it, the GitHub repository link, where you can go and see the classification code, how to use it with BERT, how to use the TensorFlow libraries. And then you can conversely, you can also grab a Colab notebook, Google Colab notebook, where it shows how to deploy BERT to predict whether IMDb movie rating is positive or negative. Okay, so this is pre-trained BERT model on top of TensorFlow. After which it brings us to the last part, which is OpenAI GPT-2. Okay, so it is a direct successor of GPT. Okay, and the only thing that GPT-2 does better than GPT is it is trained on even bigger corpus. And I was saying that it is trained on 1.5 billion parameters. They have not released the full version, so the only version released is 117 million parameters. Okay, and the text generation is straightforward using language masking. Okay, and it could be deployed, for example, a machine learning task. It could be deployed for a Q&A task, okay, with pairs of question and answers. So the only architectural difference is for GPT-2 is that the corpus which is used is a lot more compared to GPT. So as even bigger than BERT. Okay, and all downstream language tasks are framed as predicting conditional probabilities. So with the other models, we saw that there were specific scenarios like classification or clustering or question and answer or NLI or entailment. But with OpenAI GPT-2, all the downstream language tasks are just predicting conditional probabilities, and there's no specific task as such. So even with BERT, we saw that there were specific tasks like classification or for prediction. Okay, but with OpenAI GPT-2, all the downstream is treated as predicting conditional probabilities only. Okay. So if you have to summarize the difference between OpenAI GPT and BERT, then for BERT, it has the metadata, which is a separator and the CLS characters. The training process, it is okay. So this is the headings are, sorry, the headings are off. This has to be OpenAI. This has to be BERT. Okay. And in BERT, the sentence embeddings are learned at a pre-trained stage, and in OpenAI, they are introduced only at fine-tuning stage. Training process, BERT has more, 128K batch size. Here it is 32K. The fine-tuning LR is the learning rate. So learning rate is specific depending on the task for BERT. For OpenAI, there is nothing as task specific, right? So it is logarithmic for all the fine-tuning tasks. These are a summarized comparison of all the models which we saw today, whether it is GPT-2, BERT, ULM, FIT, CVT, ELMO, COVE, okay, and how they have evolved. And all these were task specific, and but going from ULM, FIT, GPT, they became task agnostics, and all layers with various trainings, pre-trained layers plus top layers and stuff like that. BERT and GPT match up almost, they match up almost similarly, just maybe a couple of batch sizes difference. Okay, but otherwise both of them do a fantastic job. And we'll wrap up with a small video. I'll just check if there are any questions. No, still. Okay. We'll wrap up the session with the video. which is, how OpenAI and BERT can be used for scenarios where, you could model. Yep. So I hope everyone has seen this video where, what they did was they teamed up the people, from BuzzFeed. They teamed up, and what they did was they trained an AI bot to kind of mock Barack Obama and Photoshop him, and even the voice was used, and they got the bot to complete sentences in the voice of Obama. So it was like a Obama bot, and these are the potential hazards when you come to GPT-2 or BERT. These could be like, we always give examples of text completions or story generation or poem generation or automated caption generation, ad campaign. So these are very constructive scenarios in how we deploy BERT and GPTs and these things. But there could be really some destructive scenarios where, for example, fake news mongering, war mongering. So let's say tomorrow someone wants to experiment and they create a video of Trump threatening to attack North Korea, or have bots do such kind of stuff. Then it could really have very hazardous hazardous results, right? So yeah, I mean, those are a few of the things where right now there's fortunately there's not much malicious use, as these two models are very new, very nascent, still being deployed, and possibilities are being studied, and the corrections being still done there. Okay, but there is I mean, the sky is the limit. There are unlimited ways in which these models could be, if we plan, they could be deployed in a very wrong manner, and for wrong purposes too. Okay, so you can just see what. I see. So you see the video got Barack Obama to say that President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. So this was something, how it can be photoshopped and could be used for kind of misrepresenting someone, for war mongering, for news mongering, for gossip mongering, misinformation, right? So we already have a lot of fake news factories which are totally churning out loads of trash, WhatsApp university, as we call it, But yeah, I mean, there are endless possibilities in ways which BERT and GPT-2 and all other language modeling techniques could be potentially employed for text or for voice, okay, for any kind of NLP scenarios. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So there are endless possibilities, and we will wait to see what kind of shape it takes in future. And yeah, that's it. So I would be happy to take any questions if there are any. And the recording for both the third and the fourth session would be made available tomorrow on the respective meetup links. So keep a watch out for that. We are sorry that the part three recording took time, a bit of time in being getting uploaded. So yeah, so this lockdown was very busy period for both Setu and me, so he was not able to upload. But yeah, so I talked to him today, so he'll be uploading both the session 4 and the session 3 videos tomorrow, the recordings tomorrow. And yeah, do let me know if you want any more specific topics or continuation to the machine learning series. So we'll maybe take a break in June, and let's see how it goes in July. So I am thinking of starting a bot series. So actually, these were the basics of machine learning, right? So these were the introduction to the algorithms. So maybe let's see if we can deploy these machine learning techniques in practical scenarios for building text analytics. So we have seen so many NLP scenarios. So let's see if we can employ these techniques in a text analytics scenario or a bot scenario, or actually text classification scenarios. So yeah, so do let me know on the meetup comments also what kind of next series you want me to take up, and we would be happy to do that. So if there are no questions, then I would like to sign off. So thank you everyone for joining, and hope all these 4 sessions were useful. And yeah, let's keep in touch. You can always reach out to me on my Twitter handle. And I wish you a very happy Monday, a happy week. Stay safe, and bye bye. Good night.